All right, good evening, everyone. We'll go ahead and get started on time. We've got a lot of material to cover tonight on a very, very important topic, bullying, cyberbullying, and internet safety. So we are going to roll right into the presentation after just a few housekeeping items. First of all, if you're new to us at HealthyU, thank you everyone for coming. But for the newcomers, restrooms are right out this door and to the left, okay? I would ask that everyone please turn off your cell phones or put them on silent. And I do want to take this opportunity to remind you about how we produce these sessions. These sessions are recorded, okay? So when you ask a question and the presenter has asked if we can hold the questions till the end, and that will be a much more productive use of the time. But when you ask a question in the audience, the presenter is going to have to repeat the question on the microphone, because otherwise the recording will only pick her up, okay, speaking in here. So keep that in mind when you ask your questions, if you will. There will be time after tonight's presentation if you did want to come up. We do a lot of tough topics in HealthyU, and sometimes people aren't always comfortable asking the question in front of a group. And if that's the question, our subject matter expert is more than willing to hang back. And if you have any scenarios or anything that you'd like to specifically ask her, she's the expert. So she will do that. So what I'd like you to feel free to do, please, right now, is go back and help yourselves to a nice dinner, hot dinner. We are bringing back some napkins. I think there's napkins not out there, but we'll get those back within about 5 minutes. So help yourselves to some food, and then we'll get started. Have you seen my latest baby? I'll talk about it. That's why I bring one. May is Mental Health Awareness Month, so it's a big month for us. And these are called You Matter kits, and they're intended for the homeless, those experiencing homeless or financially having problems, issues. And as you can see, it's basic hygiene type stuff. You know, a toothbrush, toothpaste, deodorant, soap, sunscreen, lip balm. There's food, a bottled water. And then every bag will have a 211 business card in it, so that people have a resource to go to. And every bag has a customized handwritten note of encouragement. And so we've assembled now we've got about 300 kits, but I gave 60 to the PD, our park officers, the Patty, I got people. So they came in, Suzanne came in, and I had the guys help her out because she took 3 big boxes, which is what I wanted. We gave them to our front desk people because we have homeless right here. Minsky has, and so does Mid-Florida. So gave all those out, and we've got donation boxes because I'm trying to get the public to donate. Because I gave my cost center, but I bought the first of these, but for the month, and Treasure Coast Food Bank also. I reached out to them, and they said, Patty, we can definitely give those bags away. So they're going to come and get some more bags from me and give them out at their events. No, I don't think I did.
But that might be a connection as well. And through that network, maybe get some donations.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that might be an opportunity if you see Chief Tutorial.
Sure.
And ask him about the homeless outreach ministry.
And maybe I'll shoot him an email and just say, hey, if you need some of these bags, because I do have some in my, I have them assembled. I'm just waiting for more money.
Thank you, Deb. Appreciate it.
Sir,
Who assembles these? Do you need volunteers to assemble them now?
oh, that's very kind of you. No, my staff can do it. I just need money to,
Yeah,
I
but
need the
like-
money to purchase the items.
Like at the Botanical Garden on Saturdays, maybe there's a time where
Oh, that's nice.
people could go, like, donate their time, maybe and assemble, I don't know, but you've got all the stuff here probably.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. That's very nice. Napkins are coming. Yes, ma'am. No worries. I need napkins when I eat.
Oh, me too.
I need them. Huh? Oh. I was just gonna say, weren't you the one who said that during we did a wellness connection on diabetes and nutrition? She did didn't you think so? She did a phenomenal job. She was a registered dietitian from Cleveland Clinic. And that's where Susan said, I don't eat vegetables, you know?
Whatever it is, it smells very good.
He's very good. This is the caterer from who caters at the Saints,
Oh,
the concessionaire. He is our caterer, leased to the city at the Saints Golf Course. Yeah.
it smells really good.
Mhm. There you go.
Further proving you're human.
Yes.
Just means you're extra sweet, that's all.
Okay.
Do you need some help?
Got it? All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Please, everyone, if you have room left after this, help yourselves to more, okay, please? We do have a wonderful program. I always share this. Any leftover, because I'm a big fanatic about leftover food. No one, it doesn't go to waste, trust me, with the amount of programs that we run. Tomorrow we'll have between 80 and 100 kids, used to be all boys, but it's boys and girls now, that come to our free program out at Minsky Gym tomorrow afternoon after school. So for some of those kids, they don't eat very well or often. So our food never goes to waste here. But for you newcomers, my name is Patty Roberts. I'm the Deputy Director here at the City of Port St. Lucie Parks and Recreation Department. I have been with the city for 15 years, and HealthyU is a program very near and dear to my heart. HealthyU deals primarily and strictly with mental health topics, okay, of which I'm very passionate and very committed to. Some of our topics are very difficult, and we'll talk about a couple of them that are coming up. I recognize they're not all easy topics to talk about. But as we found, especially in my opinion through COVID, if things are not talked about and diseases are not spoken about, then nothing changes. And diseases just continue. And I know for myself, I lost my son. It'll be 5 years in August. Danny died, he was 22 years old. He died right here in Port St. Lucie, not in Orlando or Miami. And he died of a heroin overdose that was laced with fentanyl. And so from that day forward, I decided I'm not going to sit like I did for the 8 years where Danny fought. And he fought. He was in and out of 14 rehabs, but I'm not going to sit at home and say, hey, I'm the only one, because I'm not. And so the more we can talk about these things, people understand that they are not alone either, and that there are resources out there. This community, I was just saying to our presenter earlier, has phenomenal mental health care providers in this community who come and speak on their own time, okay? I'm with the city, I don't have a budget, okay? So on their own time, they come and give the gift of their time and talent. So just wanted to share that with you a little bit. That's the history of HealthyU. We are in the great month of, thank you, sir, of May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Hopefully everybody knows that. Tomorrow night we'll kick off our first of 8 free programs, and they're all held outdoors in city parks. So tomorrow night we have our first free yoga class, and it's going to be at Veterans Park at Rivergate. Does everybody know where that one is? Off of the Boulevard, take a left on, is that Veterans Memorial? Right there, by the boat ramps. Beautiful park for yoga. I have been there. It's really cool. So that is coming in actually tomorrow night. Again, totally free. Saturday, there'll be an interesting one. Yes, Saturday is the first of our two forest bathing programs. They're free and they're outdoors in city parks. So Saturday we'll be at Botanical Gardens. Susan was just mentioning that. And then we'll have one about 2 weeks later at Woodstork Trail Park. That's on the east side by the hospital over there. So many of you might be saying, what is forest bathing? Okay. Forest bathing is it's from the Middle Eastern culture, and it actually means to immerse oneself in nature. So forest bathing is a combination of mindfulness, meditation, just a tidge of yoga. But our instructor, she's phenomenal, just takes you out among the trails and the paths and teaches you how to be mindful and be out in nature. So it's a really cool program. We only offered one last year, and it was so popular that we brought back a second one this year. We're doing a brain fitness session here, free. It'll be right here at this community center, but outside on the plaza. That's the big thing about May is Mental Health Awareness Month. Everything's outside. And then we're doing relaxation techniques to use outdoors. I've got a wonderful therapeutic recreation specialist who's coming to us from HCA Lawnwood. And that session will be at Woodland Trails Park. Woodland Trails is on the southwestern side of Port St. Lucie, and Mr. Anter will be giving very practical exercises to use when you're outside, how to reduce and manage your anxiety. So that's a cool one. And then we'll be offering one last one, and it's at the Saints Golf Course. Beautiful place at night. And that is on meditation and relaxation yoga. So please feel free to come out, tell your neighbors, this is free. I mean, I don't know about anybody, I'm not a yoga person, but I do understand that if people want to take a yoga class, there's typically always a fee. So this is not a fee, this is our very qualified fitness staff who are offering this. The last thing I would mention about May is Mental Health Awareness Month. And those of you newcomers might have, or my veterans anyway, heard about this from last time. But this is our latest, Patty's latest baby, if you will, that we're rolling out during May is Mental Health Awareness Month. This in my hands is actually called a U, the letter U, Matter Kit, okay? And what we've done is these kits are designed to be given out to those experiencing homelessness or who are financially disadvantaged. So what you'll see in this bag are not basic, but hygiene items. A brand new toothbrush, toothpaste, brand new pair of socks, deodorant, off wipes for the bugs, soap, let's see what else, lip balm, sunscreen. There's also a sleeve of crackers and a bottled water. But there's 2 important ingredients that are in every single bag. And one, in every bag, there'll be a referral card to 211. 211 provides services for everything: mental health, suicide crisis, drug and alcohol use, veterans and militaries. So that's always in each bag. And then also in each bag is a handwritten note of encouragement. And each bag will contain a different message. This one is be the reason someone believes in the goodness of people. Okay? And we've actually deployed these bags. It's May 3rd. And I was telling Gretchen earlier, our park, we have the huge advantage of having 6 Port St. Lucie Police Department, they're called park officers, who are assigned to our parks for public safety. And when they heard about these You Matter bags, they're like, Patty, I need them. I have got people here that in this community that need to be recognized. And that's all this is. This is not, here's a week's stay at a hotel. This is simply a very minor way to say, hey, I see you and I see what you're going through, and it will get better. I know it probably doesn't look like it now, but it will get better. And so what I'm trying to do through the You Matter kits is I'm soliciting donations from the public. I went ahead with city funds and purchased some of the bags to start. And that's what our park officers were able to get and give out to those that they run across in their patrols. But we want to assemble more. We've got a homeless situation and those struggling financially in our communities with inflation today. So I'm asking for donations there's 6 facilities in Parks and Rec that have donation boxes. So please feel free to swing by because what your donations will do is enable me to buy product, okay? I have the team that can put this stuff together, who can put these together. I just need more product, okay? And we're also partnering with the Treasure Coast Food Bank. They loved the idea and they said, Patty, I can give those bags away at their food events that they go to. So again, just a simple way to say, I see what you're going through and I'm with you on that one. And then the last thing I'll do before I promise to bring our presenter up is I'll talk about the next session of HealthyU. So the next session of HealthyU is going to be Wednesday back here in this room, June 7th. And the topic there is going to be substance use disorder with alcohol. Now, I have never done a session on alcohol. I've done many a session on opioids, but for what it's worth, it just wasn't my lived experience. So we've got a wonderful therapist coming to us from New Horizons, Ms. Lydia Smith, and she will share with us on substance use disorder with alcohol. Again, HealthyU is about 3 things only, if that's what you take away. We're here to educate the public, we're here to raise awareness, and we're here to eliminate the stigma, okay? There's not a one of us here. I'm not perfect, I'm far from perfect, okay? So let's talk about it. Let's get educated and stop the whispering behind back. So those are the 3 incentives behind HealthyU. So before we hear right from our presenter, let me tell you a little bit about her. And I promise I'll do that here. Okay. All right. Gretchen Raise-I-Ella. I did it for years. I did E-Ella, but it's Raise-E-Ella. Right? Raise-I-Ella. It's not that hard, Patty. She is a Florida certified crime prevention practitioner working with the City of Port St. Lucie Police Department. Gretchen has worked in crime prevention, created the Steve Brown Model Traffic Stop Program, and now serves as the administrative assistant for the Criminal Investigation Division. Gretchen joined the PSLPD after serving as a case manager in the Missing Children's Division at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. Gretchen's caseload was primarily focused toward the identification of child sex trafficking victims and working to resolve long-term missing children cases. Prior to that, Gretchen worked as a civilian with the City of Tampa Police Department. Gretchen began as a police dispatcher and then worked as a community service officer, originating police reports for non-emergent investigations. Upon her promotion to investigative assistant, Gretchen handled runaway juvenile cases, sex offender and career criminal tracking, robbery pattern identification, and felony assault investigations. This expansive variation in duties, coupled with extensive educational training, has afforded Gretchen a unique perspective into the source of different types of crime and useful insight as to how they can be prevented. Additionally, Gretchen owns a voice-over business primarily focused on e-learning training projects and recording public service announcements for local nonprofit organizations. So here to present for us, and I would also offer this out. Gretchen has, last year, she was actually here and presented on this same topic. As you can see, I am an older individual here. My eyes and ears were blown away with her presentation that you'll hear tonight. And the reason I say that, bullying has been around since my day. It's straight up bullying. It's been here, for before my time, okay? What has completely changed in my experience is the cyberbullying. And I learned so much from this young lady last time that we all need to hear. And we need our young people to hear that message, to be aware of it. Again, education. So without further ado, here comes Ms. Gretchen.
Thank you so much. I consider it a true privilege to be here tonight. This is my third year presenting, and I just consider it such an honor each year to be able to do that. So I thank you, and I thank Parks and Rec for inviting me once again. We're going to cover a lot of ground. So I would like to try to hold questions to the end. You have a little notebook. So if there's something you think of, please just jot it down. We'll address it at the end. Or if it is something that you feel is really personal and you'd like to talk directly about it, you can come and speak with me at the end of the presentation. There will also be a slide at the end for you to take some pictures of the slides, and my contact information will be there for you. Okay, so if you want to follow up with me later, you're welcome to do that. It was working earlier.
Of course it was.
Let's try it this way. Come on. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
There we go.
Oh.
Okay, so I'm not quite sure what I did there, and I apologize.
There you go.
There we go. Okay, we going?
Yep.
All right, there we go. Okay, here I am. So ultimately, the question is, how does this relate in the HealthyU realm? How does these topics of cyberbullying, bullying, and internet safety, how do they relate into the issues, conversations about mental health? Well, studies involving bullies have found that younger people, compared to their peers, kids who are bullied are 5 times more likely to be depressed, right? Used to be depression was an adult thing. More and more it's becoming a all ages issue. When it comes to boys, bullied boys are 4 times more likely to be suicidal, and bullied girls are 8 times more likely to be suicidal. So for adults, obviously it can lead to depression, but it also manifests itself as anxiety. It manifests itself as toxic environments that can lead to physical health problems. So physical health problems, those kind of anxieties, depressions, they can easily lead into alcohol abuse, drug addiction. So it is an issue that is expansive. It can have negative impacts across your relationships, right? Not just school, but work, your familial relationships, your interpersonal relationships, your dating relationships, right? But one of the things people don't understand is bullying leads people to lose trust in one another. And particularly for children, as they're building these foundations that are going to carry them through life. If you are being bullied and you feel like you can't trust anyone to help you, you're likely going to carry that through life, right? And so what happens is now you get into the world of the internet. And what we're seeing is there's this converse reaction where the person who's not very trusting all of a sudden becomes too trusting in the person who says, I understand what you're going through and I can rescue you from that. They become prey for a savvy predator. So it's very important to understand how these issues can be connected, okay? What we want to do here is we want to give you a framework tonight. We want to give you an understanding of what these issues are, bullying, cyberbullying, and how it relates with internet safety. And we want to help you recognize ways that victimization is implemented, ways that it then impacts people, and then help you develop an action plan, right? We want you to be able to then have steps that you can take to start engaging in the healing process. So what is it? There is a growing consensus among behavioral scientists that bullying has 3 components. It's aggressive behavior, intentional harm perpetrated by one person or a group. It's done repeatedly over time. And it targets someone that the bully perceives is less powerful. It includes verbal aggression, it can be insults, it can be threats, it can be psychological, it can be physical. According to the federal government, this is how the federal government defines bullying. The imbalance of power, bullies use physical strength, right? They can use financial strength. But those power imbalances over time and in different situations, they always involve the same people, right? They pick a target and they stick with their target. Repetition. Bullying behavior happens more than once. And then, sorry, where did my third one go? And then there's the threats, the aggression, I'm sorry. But the Florida Department of Education, and this is probably where you really want to key up on this. Florida Department of Education defines it this way: systematically and chronically inflicting physical hurt or psychological distress on one or more students or employees. Can you believe we live in a day and age where they had to add "or employees" to that statement? But we do. But it causes distress that is severe enough to create an intimidating or a hostile environment that unreasonably interferes with an individual's ability to succeed in school. So it's important to understand these because the response to this is relative to the environment that it's occurring in, right? So for our purposes, we're going to talk about bullying being the ongoing deliberate misuse of power in relationships through repeated verbal, physical, social behavior intending to cause social or psychological harm. And it can be one person, it can be groups of people misusing their power. But bullying of any form for any reason can be immediate. It can have immediate consequences, long-term consequences, and it can affect the bystanders, the people who are watching this occur, right? So we need to understand it so that we can recognize it transcends just children in school, right? Bullying occurs on college campuses. It occurs in the workplace, right? Anybody ever seen it in the workplace? Yeah, it's becoming more and more of an issue. But the thing we really have to be concerned with is that bullying behaviors, many times, those are the first step in behavioral patterns that leads to dating violence and domestic abuse. So it starts with the bullying. Now, bullying, it can be direct, it can be face-to-face, but those include acts of a physical nature, right? Hitting, kicking, slapping, shoving, verbal acts such as insults, harassments, put downs, involves giving people the silent treatment or excluding them. Sometimes that can be even more impactful than an aggressive in the face sort of act. It can involve psychological actions like dirty looks, coercion, threats, even extortion. So that's what we look at as far as direct bullying. Indirect, that's done because we want to lower the other people's opinion of the bullied subject. All of the literature you see, all of the things that talks about bullying, it talks about victims. I try really hard not to refer to them as victims because I don't want to see people get a victim mentality. I think everyone with education and sometimes therapy and sometimes the help of other people, you can be empowered to do something. But throughout this, you're going to hear me refer to it as victims because if you take and you go and look at any of these resources, that's how they're going to refer to it. But for our purposes today, these are people who need to be empowered, right? But it's spreading untrue rumors, telling people, don't be friends with her, don't be friends with him. The intent is they're trying to damage someone else's relationship with you. Ladies, I think we have a term for that, don't we? It's called being catty. Yep. Yeah, well, being catty is another way of being a bully. And sometimes people just fail to recognize that that's at the heart what it is. So the research that has gone into these topics indicates there's really three primary types of bullies, right? The aggressive bully, that's your most common type. They are fearless. They are belligerent. They are coercive, impulsive. They have no tolerance for frustration at all. And usually their frustration is a catalyst to a bullying event. They have a strong inclination towards violence. They generally initiate the aggression towards their peers, right? Now, passive bullies, they don't usually provoke the fears, but they join in, right? They're the followers, not the leaders, right? So they're your passive bullies. I'm gonna stand back here and, I'm gonna bolster the bully's bravado by backing them up, right? So that's what a passive bully is. Bully victims, they're an interesting group. They're the victims of bullying who resort to bullying others out of frustration. Well, how do we get to that place? We're going to talk about that specifically in just a minute. But recently they've started kind of identifying this fourth type, and it's really involving girls. And those are the relational bullies, right? Everybody remember the movie Mean Girls? Like they were like, if you ever want to see relational bullies on the big screen, Mean Girls. If you've ever seen the movie You Again, anybody ever see that movie? You Again has a great example there of relational bullies. But the idea is they're going to get social status by excluding others. right? They can't just elevate themselves. They got to step on someone else in order to be elevated, right? So why? Well, there's not a single cause, right? They really have not identified one single cause, but there are some factors that indicate what influences a bully to develop. And number one, as much as no one wants to admit it, is family dynamics. What is going on at home is usually mirrored outside of the home. How family members relate to one another impacts how a developing child relates on the people around them. It is truth universal, unfortunately. Children who experience bullying in the home tend to develop the same exact behavior, and the ones who witness it between parents or their siblings, they're going to model that, right? They always say, your kids are always watching. That is so true. They're watching the good, bad, and the indifferent. So understanding that parental example is so critically important. And managing this interactions if you've got one parent bullying the other, right? Now, one of the other things that I have not found much research on yet, but I think it's something that some smart person somewhere needs to start studying. We really aren't teaching our toddlers how to manage their emotions. And you think, well, who cares? Well, because has anybody noticed that more and more of our Gen Zers, I guess, where we at? Gen Z, the ones that are throwing fits at 20 years old on the Publix grocery store floor, I'm going to say someone didn't learn to manage their emotions when they were a toddler, because they're exhibiting the same exact behavior in a big person's body, right? Now, obviously, we have to give grace and exception. We have a lot of students ADHD. We have a lot of people coming up with autism. We have those kind of things. That's not what I'm talking about, right? That is a whole other realm, a whole other sphere, right? But when you have a toddler who is straight up having a tantrum because there's a need that they want met and it's not getting met, and you don't help them regulate that, process that, and deal with that emotion in a proper way, later on in life, you're going to be on the other side of that behavior. And it's not cute when they're 25 and they do it, right? So that's something I hope that someone will take more of a look into. But so what else? In schools where bullying is ignored by educators, where no disciplinary action is taken against the bullies, the negative behavior, it thrives and it spreads like wildfire, right? So behaviors that are perceived as permissible and acceptable, that empowers the bullies to act, right? It was great Tuesday, it was better Wednesday, and Thursday, woohoo, right? They were living the dream. Well, unfortunately, for the person that they're bullying, they're living the nightmare, right? They're on the converse side of the other side of that. So when peers engage or support bullying, children draw the conclusion, hey, this is allowable. This is what how we're supposed to behave. And if I want to be accepted and I don't want to be on the other end of that, I need to join in on that, right? So that peer influence can become a critical point. So we referenced the movie Mean Girls, and, but there's a lot of behaviors that are depicted on television and in video games, and in the things that are on YouTube and Reels and TikTok, where people draw the conclusion, hey, it's okay to act like that, right? I want to get my way. So instead of being assertive, they're aggressive, and they fail to recognize the difference, right? Because I think we can all agree, there's a huge difference. So those media messages, they can get really twisted up and conflicted, particularly when you go back to what I said just a slide before, where if there's no parental guidance, and unfortunately, we're seeing more and more and more youth who are coming up and they are being raised by their phones, right? You see the whole family and they're all out and every single one of them is staring at their phones, right? Well, this is the place that we're coming to. Those media messages, that inability to relate to one another is facilitating the problem. So now you get this stuff ingrained, they move into the adult world. That's where the term bully bosses comes from. Anybody ever experienced a bully boss? Oh, those are the worst. Because they're pervasive across every industry, right? Across every single industry. And surprisingly enough, in the humanitarian industries, you really, really see it, right? Because they can go in there and be like, I'm going to come in here, I'm going to run roughshod all over these bleeding hearts, right? That wanted the do-gooders. So it's a really pervasive problem. And in 2017, and you have to understand, some of our numbers are not caught up because COVID really messed with statistical numbers across all kinds of boards. But in 2017, when they did a study and they were asking, are you experiencing a bully boss? 61% of the people they asked were. So, then we had COVID, and I think it got worse. I really do. I think all the isolation and everything else of COVID just took everything and exacerbated it. But, we can't rely on the notion, well, kids will grow out of it. Nope, they grow up into it, and they're taller and stronger and more difficult to deal with. That's what's happening. So there's a book by Elliot Aronson. It's called Nobody Left to Hate. If you're an avid reader, I encourage you to read it. Again, it's called Nobody Left to Hate, and the author is Elliot Aronson. And Mr. Aronson cites research revealing that bullies just grow more hostile over time. Unless there's appropriate intervention, unless there's appropriate therapy, they just grow more hostile over time. And by the age of 24, 2/3 of the boys who were bullies in elementary school have been convicted of 3 or more crimes. Yeah, that's kind of startling when you think about it. So and you have to understand, we're not talking about blue collar crimes. We're talking about violent felony offenses. And they're by that point, by age 24, they've already served time in prison, right? So we have to recognize and address that hostility displayed in youth has the potential to influence the trajectory of the person's life, right? And so it's, going from hostility to violence to prison, they're actually pretty close steps, and it happens pretty quickly, because when you think about the grand scheme of a lifetime, right? From elementary school to age 24, that is a wisp of time. It truly is a wisp of time. So the advent of computer networks, commonly referred to as cyberspace, has allowed bullying to move from the traditional school or workplace settings into completely new realms. Completely new realms. So now the internet and cell phones are being used to terrorize people, literally terrorize them. So, and it doesn't take a lot of effort to do. If you know how to, use the right programs, you can do it with a lot of anonymity. Nobody's going to know it's you unless somebody digs into phone records and subpoenas and all kinds of other crazy things. And usually that doesn't happen. So it makes it really easy for the bully to conceal his or her identity, right? And it makes it really hard to hold them accountable for their actions. Really, really hard. So we are seeing bullies more aggressive than they ever have been before. And Mom, I really need you to hear me on this, okay? The metaverse. Anybody know what the metaverse is? So it's owned by Facebook. Keep your children away from the metaverse. Keep them away. Don't let your grandbabies go there. Law enforcement has not caught up with what is occurring on the metaverse. The metaverse, and I probably explained this incorrectly. My 16-year-old grandson, bless his heart, has tried to explain this to me in technical terms. And for whatever reason, this is the one thing I can't seem to grasp really well. But this is how I explain it to people. So if you want to go and you want to go onto the Parks and Recreation website and you want to see the calendar of events, the first thing you do is you open up a web page, whether it's Google, Bing, Firefox, Explorer, right? You open up your web page. And then you type in, City of Port St. Lucie Parks and Recreation Department calendar. And it takes you on the internet, takes you to that page, okay? The metaverse is the web page of virtual reality. You go into the metaverse to get to virtual reality games and functions, okay? So that's really the best way I can explain it. So what's happening is people, and when you're going into virtual reality, right? Virtual reality means you are experiencing this with, goggles, with things in your hands. You are feeling physical sensations of what your eyes are seeing, right? It's horrifying. It is horrifying the things that are being done to avatars in the metaverse. And you think, well, why does that matter? It matters because the person wearing those devices is physically feeling the sensations, okay? So your avatar is being battered, assaulted, victimized. Ladies, I think there's a word here that you can think of that I'm not going to say because we have a young person in the room, okay? That's what's happening to avatars in the metaverse. So imagine your 10-year-old granddaughter watching that and having those sensations, physical sensations. We don't have laws for that yet. Is she any less victimized? Because technically she physically experienced it. So you see where I'm heading with all of this? Keep your children, your grandchildren, your nephews, cousins, whomever, keep them off the metaverse because we have not caught up with that mess yet. So the best thing, just stay away. Just don't let them go there because bullying in the metaverse, that it's like the first thing that the avatars are programmed to do. the first thing that that avatar sets out to do is to dominate you. So just understand that. Sorry, I got on a soapbox on the metaverse because I'm telling, like, I can't wrap my head around what we're going to have to do legally to deal with what is transpiring in the metaverse. Like, that is a whole lot of Supreme Court battles, and it's going to be a lot of craziness. So anyway, so who the bully targets depends on a lot of different factors, right? But there's a lot of similarities that have been identified in victims. And many times that target has very few friends to protect them. That's why our populations are differently abled populations are so critically at risk, because they don't have a lot of friends to protect them, right? And these aggressors are gonna look for opportunities where nobody's around to see what happened, right? So imagine you've got a nonverbal autistic child, and all of a sudden somebody walks in the room and something has happened to them. They can't tell you what happened. So it's like a bully's dream come true, right? So having few friends and being perceived as different, being differently abled, those are things that are just easy marks, right? For the person who wants to be the bully, those are the types of characteristics they're going after first. Somebody who's not gonna fight back, somebody who's quirky, somebody who's odd, somebody who has glasses, somebody who has braces, somebody who's fat, somebody who's too thin in their mind. They're gonna pick the thing out, and usually they are super good at keying in on the thing that you don't like about yourself the most. Boy, they are good at going straight to the heart of whatever your issue is. So that's what they're looking for. That's who they're targeting. And they want to do it, you have to understand this, at a psychological level that really adversely impacts that person, right? What is that saying that goes, hurting people hurt people, right? And I mean, that's sort of, you take bully, that's bullying on steroids, right? So what happens later on? Well, bullied students start to become truant. They don't want to go to school, right? Who would want to go to school in that? They start suffering from depression. They start becoming suicidal. They are experiencing the violence, right? And there's a whole cascade of other things that happen there, right? Because a lot of times the truancy, you know, we're moms and dads Monday through Friday now at work, right? They're at work. You know, like, I don't know about y'all, but our family, everybody's got to work because, you know, eggs are $12, you know, like, it's tough. It's tough. So moms and dads are out there working, right? And it makes it very easy for their children to be truant. Very easy. There's no regard for the impact of those long-term impacts of those multiple absences from school. These kids aren't thinking of it in, gosh, this is going to affect my GPA. Gosh, this is going to affect my ability to get into college. All they're thinking about is, I don't want to go to school and get pummeled today, right? And same thing, you know, when we have these negative feelings and we carry that into adulthood, overall self-esteem throughout the lifetime of a person can be impacted because of childhood torment, right? There are people walking around today with their heads hung low because of what somebody did to them in 3rd, 4th, or 5th grade. So we've seen multiple instances where bullying victims use violence as a means of revenge on the people who they perceive as perpetrators, right? And it leaves this path of destruction. Does anybody want to know where a lot of that path actually leads? A study of school shooters who did not take their own lives during the attack provided really startling insight into this issue. So more than 2/3 of those interviewed stated they had been bullied and the shooting was revenge. And they targeted teachers and administrators who they felt failed to stop the bullying. And their quotes, all of the other victims were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. That is a hard pill to swallow, a really hard pill to swallow when we're looking at mass casualty events in our children's schools, right? So here's the thing though, the same holds true in the workplace. When you see these mass shootings in workplaces, same questions, same answers. There was bullying going on in the workplace, and they targeted the boss who didn't protect them. They targeted the boss that was the bully. They targeted the bully, and everybody else was in the wrong place at the wrong time. So this issue has become so pervasive that not only do we have, all of the educational world scrambling, trying to figure out how do we stop the mass shootings in school, we've got the federal government trying to figure out how to stop it in the workplace. OSHA has a whole page dedicated to violence in the workplace and identifying bullying and stopping that behavior before it becomes a mass casualty incident. So when you hear these conversations about, well, is it, what's the issue? Is it guns? Is it this? Is it that? Is the other thing? It's the fact that we didn't deal with some things for these people early on in their lives, and they manifested that in the worst possible way, right? Now, unfortunately, that's all we have to go on because so many of those shooters, workplace shooters, school shooters, they end up either taking their own lives or being killed by law enforcement. So we don't have massive amounts of information, and thankfully we don't. I mean, we don't want mass groups to be able to collect information on that from, but that, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, because we don't want that to be a relative thing. Well, we need 50 school shootings in order to get 50 perpetrators to interview. We don't want that. But, it's startling when you understand the things that they've talked about. So, you got to understand that revenge, it's not always limited to the people who they perceived hurt them. Which, by the way, just on a side note, our crime prevention unit at the City of Port St. Lucie Police Department, we do teach we call it active attack training. So if your business, you have a civic organization, your church, your synagogue, your mosque, whatever, you want to have that kind of training done, we do offer that as a free training. Okay, so just bear that in mind. That's something you can call and schedule with our crime prevention unit. So what can we do to address this issue? Well, first, we have to understand that for youth in particular, bullying is a very real problem. We can't keep going, just don't worry about it. You're going to grow up. You're going to get over it. No, that's not the case. Before they ever tell an adult, many youth perceive that no one's going to help them, so they don't bother to tell anyone. It's not that they're afraid. There's you're not going to do anything about it because they've gotten that messaging over and over again, right? So as far as they're concerned, nothing can be done, so why bother? Well, if you're the adult in the life, you got to take it seriously, right? You have to address it. And it's really important that any reports of bullying, it's not just for the benefit of the child at the center of the report, but the child who's watching and the child who's perpetrating, right? It's not so much necessarily about punishment, but identifying, hey, here's a problem and we need to help you learn how to manage this better, how to interact with people better, right? So it's not just about helping the person who's the one who's on the receiving end. It's collective, and it's the who's watchings, because those are the outliers and we don't know. So you have to make sure that the person who is receiving the bullying, that their feelings, their experiences, they're validated. It's not something to just be sloughed off, right? Because if you don't validate their perception, again, goes right back to why bother? Nobody's going to do anything, you know, they can get away with it. It's okay. It's not okay. And then that traverses into the issue of open communication, right? People are struggling to know how to communicate with one another, right? If it's not on a text message, you know, and there's not an emoji, so you know if it's a happy text message or a sad text message, people don't know what you're thinking, right? Because people are losing the ability, the art of communication. That is an art we can't afford to lose, right? It needs to be open. And the person, from whatever role they're in, whether they're the one experiencing it, whether they're the one watching it, whether they're the one perpetrating it, they need to be able to talk to somebody who's willing to say, you know what, okay, I'm going to listen, and we're going to figure out a way forward with this. What do we need to do to make this stop? What do we do to, you know, validate your experience? And what do we do to help the person who feels like this is the way that they interact with you? And it's not easy. Really not easy. So the thing we cannot neglect is adult education. And I'm so excited to see each one of you out here today participating in this, right? Because adults in any profession, but particularly in the education field, right? But any profession, taking bullying seriously and then modeling the behaviors that you ultimately expect the people around you to exhibit, right? That, right? Isn't that the challenge? That's the hard part. But strengthening adult social skills through education, through strategies, through problem-solving skill sets, those are huge. A lot of human resources departments, they have the employee assistance programs so that you can go through those. A lot of them now offer, 8 free sessions, 6 or 8 free sessions, and you can go in and you can start to learn, okay, I can employ these strategies, I can employ these skills and deal with it, whether it's in the workplace or whether you're helping your child or grandchild or whomever at home, right? But that is a resource that you shouldn't overlook when it comes to this topic. And anybody in any sort of position that is dealing with a bully or they're dealing with children, you're going to benefit from a conflict resolution course, right? There's a lot of organizations out there that they offer for free, right? But a conflict resolution course is something that helps you manage conflict situations and do it in a way that brings a satisfactory resolution for everyone. And that's really important. We don't want to give the message, well, you just need to get along. Yes, you do. But many times getting along means that the person who is being, who these things are being perpetrated against has to change their behavior. And that's not necessarily the person that needs to change their behavior, right? So we don't want to put a child or an adult in a workplace who's being bullied into a position where they now have to cower and they have to cater to the person who's perpetrating this against them, because you know what that is? Validation that it's okay for them to do that, right? And well-intentioned people have done that without recognizing the long-term impact of that, the long-term effect. We do not, the bullied party needs reassurance that the responsibility for the situation lies squarely on the person who is perpetrating it. And that's the behavior that needs to be addressed and changed. What the person who's experiencing it needs is a safety plan, right? First and foremost, they need a safety plan. Then they need, to understand who their resources are. There needs to be things in place to make sure that things are being monitored more closely. So how do you do that in the workplace? HR. That is a responsibility of your human resources department. And understand that when you get into the workplace, if your human resources department fails to do certain things, remember I said OSHA has a whole section on bullying? Your human resources department, your company can be fined and cited because there is protection through OSHA. So it's important to understand that these things are in place to protect those who are experiencing those things, okay? So next, you have to support those who are being bullied. You have to listen and focus, learn what exactly is going on, and then show them that you want to help, right? Assure the person who is experiencing this, hey, this is not your fault, right? It's, this is actually the scenario where you can say, it's not you, it's them, right? The true story, it's not you, it's them. So know that, it's a tough thing to talk about. So you may have to engage counseling. You may have to engage a psychologist. You may have to engage some other sort of mental health professional. And there shouldn't be any kind of a stigma associated with that, because that is part of what those professionals are there to help with, right? Because again, remember what we talked about in the beginning, it all tracks back to self-esteem, it tracks back to depressive orders, it can lead to, addiction scenarios. So important to recognize and appreciate that those resources can be engaged. Giving advice about how to respond. And this is where you have to be really, really careful, and you have to be really cognizant of who's giving the advice. Because there was a time, when, how you dealt with a bully? You went outside after school and you fought it out in the parking lot, and that was supposed to be the end of it, right? And there are people today who will still give that advice. That is not good advice by any means, because you're telling them basically, hey, I know you don't feel like you can't defend yourself, so why don't you go get in a physical fight with them and see how that goes, right? You have to be careful of who's giving the advice. But help give advice on how to practically apply. What do we do with this, right? How does this happen? If it's in the workplace, it might be what you have to do is you have a message or something that you send to another coworker. Hey, because a lot of us have Teams, we have messaging, that kind of thing that we can send across our computer. Hey, can you listen in at my office? So that someone else is hearing what's happening as well, so that when you go to HR, it's not a matter of your word against the boss, right? Now, I'm not telling you to illegally record anyone. Please don't mistake that. You got that, communications, right? I did not tell anybody to record anyone. That is illegal to record people without their consent. That's why we told you at the beginning we were recording this. So that's not what I'm saying, but it's okay, you know, in the workplace, the advice might be, hey, listen, have another coworker, because even, you know, just having that person walk into the room might be the thing that makes that person who is perpetrating the offense walk out, right? So make sure that, you know, the child, parents, school, organization, they all have valuable input. And don't lose sight of asking the person who's experiencing it, what would you like us to do? Not in a condescending, well, what do you want me to do? What would you like us to do? What would help you feel as though this is being resolved, right? And that is a question in the workplace HR should be asking you, okay? So the other part of that is we want to make sure changes in routine do not impact the person who's experiencing it, right? Because most of the time what the school will do is they'll move the child who's being victimized to another class. Well, why are we doing that? They weren't the problem. But that's how they solve the problem. So we need to make sure that the moves that are necessary, switching of classrooms, reassigning to different departments, maybe moving positions, reassigning job positions, those should be done in a way that are impacting the person who's perpetrating the behavior, not the person who's experiencing it, right? And then remember, this is really, really important, Mom, the law does not allow the school to discuss discipline that they engage with you if it's not pertinent to your child. So they can't tell you, okay, this is how we're dealing with Bobby or Susie or Timmy or, you know, Samantha, unless one of those are your children. So, and that becomes very frustrating for people. And the same in many ways is true in the workplace, right? There's certain disciplinary action protections that HR, you know, they can't tell you, well, you know, we wrote Bob up and he's got suspended for a week with no pay. They're not allowed to tell you that because now they have just violated Bob, right? I know, it makes me want to shake my head too, but but the reality is there are protections in place, right? So we have to understand that because a lot of people get very frustrated since they don't know or understand that, right? Now, you got to understand these behaviors don't start overnight. They may not end overnight, but there has to be a commitment to whether it's the child, whether it's the employee, there has to be a commitment that there's going to be consistency in the support to ultimately make this stop, right? When, and this is particularly helpful for, again, in the education setting, but again, in the workplace, it can be, you know, when adults respond quickly and consistently to bullying behavior, they send the message that it's not acceptable. Right? So that can stop bullying behavior over time, as long as it's being dealt with on the spot. You know, it's that principle of, you know, your dog makes a mistake on the carpet, so you wait 3 hours and then you kick him because, well, first of all, you shouldn't be kicking your dog. But secondly, you know, you don't punish a dog 3 hours later for a mistake that they've just made. Right? That's ineffective. And the same is true when it comes to all sorts of behaviors. So it's important that if it's seen, it's dealt with on the spot, right? And not just a matter of, oh, we're going to separate. No, we need to take the next step in the next action. And that, okay, somebody is going to the principal's office or somebody is going to HR's office or the big boss's office, or there needs to be an addressing of that situation as it's occurred if it's seen in occurrence. So, you know, intervene intermittently, separate the parties involved, make sure everyone is safe, and then meet, excuse me, meet immediately any medical or mental health needs. Meet those immediately. Stay calm and reassure all of the parties involved, including the bystanders. Don't forget about the bystanders, right? Reassure everyone it's okay, and we're going to deal with this. We've got this under control. But the critical thing is, if you're the person intervening, you have to model respectful behavior when you intervene. You can't intervene with anger. You can't intervene with the words you want to edit out later. You can't intervene that way, right? You have to model the respectful behavior when you intervene. So, the common mistakes always, you don't ignore it. Don't immediately try to sort out the facts, right? Because when emotions are high, you're going to get one set of information. When everybody's had a chance to take a deep breath, remember your free yoga, deep breaths, calm down. Then you have, then have the conversations, because you're going to get more of the facts out at that point. Do not, and this is particularly critical for children, don't force them to say publicly what happened. Do not force them to do it publicly. Take them to a private space where they are comfortable talking, where they don't feel like they have to defend themselves against a whole room of classmates or a whole room of, and depending on your coworkers, and most of us as as adults, we can perceive better what's going on with the people around us. But if you know that your coworker is someone who that would make them very, very uncomfortable, then help them get to a quiet place as well, so they can talk freely about it without having to do it in a public setting. Don't question the other people involved in front of one another either, because remember, you don't know who in the people out lying is your passive bullies, who's the people that are looking for the opportunity to join in. And by asking those things out in the public, you're giving them an opportunity to say, okay, this is where I'm gonna latch in on this so that I can protect myself, right? And don't make the kids particularly involved. Now, adults, this is a little bit different, but the kids, don't make them apologize or patch up their relationships on the spot. They need time, they need space, and they need an opportunity to process their emotions, to address and understand the experience they've just had, okay? By forcing them to apologize at that point, first of all, if they're on the receiving end, they shouldn't be apologizing for anything. That's, not good. But if the perpetrating person, by forcing them to, you're going to get the flippant sorry. Now let's have some time to reflect on this and really unpack. Are we sorry? Because a flippant sorry carries no meaning, right? It means nothing. So don't force that on the spot. Now with adults, we have a little bit more, listen, y'all, I'm gonna give you a little confession right now. You ready? Probably 2 to 3 times a day, I walk away from people and count to 10. I do. Usually it's because I have a particular disdain, and I'm sorry. I'm gonna give you an absolute truth. I'm going to fly right in the face of something people have always told you. It's not true, it's not true, it's not true. There is such a thing as a stupid question. There absolutely, positively is. And I'll give you an example, okay? If I am unwell and I am having a face-to-face conversation with a toilet bowl, do not ask me if I am okay. Clearly, the answer is no, right? So there you go. If anybody ever says no such thing, oh, that's not true. Don't ask a sick person if they're okay. Do you understand? There is such a thing as a stupid question. And sometimes in public service, it's just a little challenging because we do our very best to explain something to someone, and then we explain it to them in a different way that maybe they'll understand, and then we try it in another different way. And then they come back and they say, yeah, but I've explained it to you 3 times. And no matter how you reframe the question or how I reframe the answer, nothing changed, right? So I walk away and I count to 10 a lot. I encourage that. I encourage it because it's a really great way to be able to get along with people, right? Particularly if you're dealing with the public. But some of us have coworkers that make us need to count to 100. And I guarantee you, every one of you right now is thinking of that person. But the point is, with adults, we can take that minute, right? We can take that deep breath, we can take that, do that counting, and then step back and say, you know what? Maybe I didn't respond to you in my best way. Maybe I was overly aggressive, and I should not have spoken to you in that manner, in that tone. You know, we have the capacity, some of us have the capacity as adults to do that, right? So that's the thing that we want to encourage, right? The mature, elevated, calm, you know, the mature response. Now, when do you call for help? First and foremost, you get police or medical attention immediately if a weapon is involved. No ifs, no ands, no buts. Here in the city of Port St. Lucie, we use 911 for everything, okay? If there are threats of serious physical injury, if there are threats that are hate-motivated violence, racism, homophobia, if there's serious bodily harm, if there's sexual abuse, anyone accused of an illegal act, such as robbery or extortion, using force to get money or property or services, anything that puts you in fear for safety or causes physical harm, that is the time that you call for help. I'm looking at the clock, and I know we're gonna zip through these next couple of things. So the Florida Department of Education, and if y'all want to get your phones and start snapping some pictures, does prohibit bullying. Okay, and there is a Florida state statute in regard to bullying and harassment. So it's very important if you have children, grandchildren, whatever in school experiencing this, you need to go, and you can go on to the Google or the Bing or the Firefox, whoever you choose, look up that state statute and read what it says. But it is, and it applies to in-school, school-related events, you name it, through school computers. A lot of them don't realize, a lot of those kids don't realize that. They all have school computers and they use them to bully each other, which is, you can see that they're not doing well in school. Then through the use of, computer software, even at a non-school related location. Okay, so it can carry over from school depending on the circumstances. It definitely includes in-person and cyberbullying. Every school district has to state what their bullying policy is. Everybody here, I'm sure, is probably in St. Lucie County School District. They have it online. You can go and read it for yourself. I encourage you to do that. Workplace, your employee handbook should have those kind of materials. If it doesn't, ask your HR department. They really need to give it to you. There are federal resources, like I said before, on employee rights. So if your employer doesn't have it, you can get it from from the federal government. So obviously what's more challenging to address on the spot is the cyberbullying. Everybody's connected to the technology. So, it can be hard, and particularly when you have things like Snapchat or other kinds of apps where the communications disappear. It's really, really important, very, very important that whenever possible, you have to preserve the evidence, Whether you take a screenshot of it with the phone, you have to preserve it, right? A lot of people will say, well, just delete it and block them. Okay, that's all great, fine and well, until they come at you from a different angle with a different phone number or something else. And now all of that evidence that you had, you deleted, right? Don't do it. Don't delete it. Save it, preserve it. The U.S. Department of Health and Human Services has a resource guide. And you can see there, cyberbullying.org, identification, prevention, and response. That's a really great resource. Again, the metaverse, they're coming out with information about that. So that's a good resource, a good place for you to go and keep on top of what's happening in the metaverse. Understand that cyberbullying, it is a whole new level of tactics. Straight up, students will tell each other, young men, young women are telling, there was just a woman who went through the court system because she told a girl online to kill herself, and the girl did. So, these things, they can have profound consequences in actuality and in the legal system. So that's a whole new level. And then, of course, there's the issue of embarrassing photos, right? Wanting to use embarrassing photos, putting them on websites, those kind of things, and doxing. Anybody familiar with the term doxing? Okay, a very famous example of doxing happened a couple of years ago when there was a protest, a pro-life rally that happened in Washington, D.C., and there was allegedly a confrontation between a young man and an Indian elder. And okay, so the next thing that happened is that young man's address, home address, his school address, his phone numbers, his everything was put online. That is doxing. Okay, so doxing is basically an abbreviated form of Word documents, basically. But they're putting your personal information out there on the internet for the purpose of having other people terrorize, threaten, and bully you, right? So it's a big deal. It has significant legal consequences. And if none of you have followed up with that young man, he is a multi-billionaire now because of all the people that him and his attorneys have been able to successfully sue for those acts. Agree, disagree, whatever, but to put a child's information online, and he was a child, legally in the United States, he was a child. It's just, we need to do better than that. So doxing is a big thing. Sexting, anybody familiar with that term? Because a lot of our kids, they don't date anymore, they sext. It's, instead of, would you like to go roller skating with me on Friday? It's, hey baby, send me a pic. And I'm gonna leave you to fill in the other kind of word about what kind of picture that is. So it's all supposed to be lovey-dovey because we're boyfriend, girlfriend until we break up. And then I'm gonna send your picture to everybody. And where that becomes particularly interesting is when they send it across state lines, because that can be considered distribution of child pornography, and you can go to prison for that. So again, cyberbullying.org, sexting advice for parents. Very, very, very important. Our young children need to know if someone says, hey, take a picture for me. Take a picture. You understand what kind of picture I'm talking about, Mom? Tell them no. Don't respond. Review the terms of your user agreements. All of that stuff that you don't read, you just click and move on. That's where all of this information becomes really particular, because that's your legalese. That's where your important information is housed about what's legal, illegal, who can help you, who can't help you. Remember to engage the school, even if it seems like it's something happening after school. It may be relative under the state statute connected to the school. Report the crime, and also remember your online service providers. A lot of people don't realize that your online service provider, so whoever you have your cable through, Comcast, Xfinity, whoever, they are actually the first source for reporting these types of things. And, few people forget to contact their online service provider. And particularly, when it comes to things like stalking and hate crimes, which, those are just like 2 steps from bullying, right? That's like, a half a step from cyberbullying. So, and particularly when it comes to issues like explicit messages or photos, your internet service provider is actually your biggest line of defense. And a lot of people don't know, most of the reports that come into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children with regards to the exploitation part, okay, because I think all of the grownups in the room understand what I'm alluding to. Most of those reports that come in with those images come from internet service providers, because they say, hey, this was transmitted across our service. So they report that to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. National Center for Missing and Exploited Children looks at where did this transmission occur, and then those reports get forwarded to that local law enforcement agency. So it's one of the few things the cable companies actually do well. So here's some additional resources for you. I'm sorry, there's a lot of stuff to talk about in this topic, and I'm sorry we're having to fly through this. But some additional resources, if you want to take a picture, you can go check these things out afterwards. Again, don't forget about OSHA. I don't have a link to OSHA there, but don't forget about OSHA if you're dealing with this in the workplace. And then there's the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration app. And they have a whole section about no bullying. So that is an app that can be downloaded on the phone, and that can actually give you real-time resources. So if there's something that's going on, you can look for, resources in real time. Okay, it's free. So, okay, any questions? Yes.
Okay, wasn't there a law that if you went to the doctors and the doctor saw that the child was bruised or something like that, they had to go ahead and report it? So, all right, I volunteered at this SR camp. I saw this kid picking on this other kid, so, I don't know these kids from anything, so I just distracted them and kind of broke them up. Then later on, we were scavenger hunt, this kid was picking on another kid. So I went to the counselor who knows these kids, and I said, hey, can I just notice that this kid's oh, he does that to everybody. Wasn't there that thing where I told that counselor about that, and that counselor said, oh, he does that to all the kids. And they're talking about a 7, he was maybe 8 years old. And, he was really being a little.
Was he physically assaulting him?
No.
Okay, because what you asked me.
Like the one he was taking something from, the other one he went over and he was,
Yeah.
You could just see it. And I was only for 2 hours. I observed this. Shouldn't she be held some type of thing because she's she is in charge of that child? Or it's not like the doctor.
Legally, no. So what you're alluding to is mandatory reporting, right? So doctors, teachers, that has to do with physical abuse, sexual abuse, those kind of things. Now,
One time he was like pulling the kids,
yeah. Now,
just you could see it.
right. So physically, physical abuse, that's a different thing, right? And in that instance, it's an issue that A, it should have been dealt with right then and there. And, B, it did it rise to the level of, was it a criminal offense committed against the child, right? Is the child physically injured, that kind of thing, because that's,
You could see it.
I understand. But the other thing you have, and that's why I said you need to go read the statutes. You have to understand that a crime is defined by what a statute says it is, right? Another thing that makes me count to 10 is when somebody says, well, I feel like it should be a crime. Really? Because your feelings are not listed anywhere in Florida state statute. They're not listed in federal penal codes. They're nowhere, right? It's not about feeling. It is, what does the law say, right? And, obviously you start at, what is your municipal law, county law, state law, federal law? There's a hierarchy of law. So when it comes to mandatory reporting, there's a specific threshold. When it comes to the issue of bullying, now it's a matter of who is the host organization, right? Because ultimately that should be something that should have been addressed by the host organization. And if it rose to the level of, okay, we could look at a state statute and say, okay, this little girl was battered, right? Then we could, is the child old enough for criminal charges? Is it, we don't want to go running around throwing 5-year-olds in jail for pulling pigtails. But but there also has to be, there has to be a threshold when we say, now, as a 5-year-old pulling I don't know how old these kids were, but, okay, so that wouldn't have necessarily been an appropriate age to make it a criminal offense, but it is something that the host agency or organization should have absolutely dealt with. And the dealing with it might have been, sorry, you're pulling people's hair, you cannot come back tomorrow. I'm calling your parents, you're going home today, you're not going to have the opportunity to pull anybody's hair tomorrow, right? Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and mandatory reporting is a critically important thing. It really is a critically important thing, but you also have to look at what is the context of the situation. Yeah, absolutely, you're welcome. Any other questions? No? Okay. Yes.
So there was a picture at the very beginning of like a 10-year-old boy in a white shirt with a black eye.
Yes.
Sitting in a school setting. Does every school in Port St. Lucie, like who is he supposed to turn to if he's the target of bullying? Is there a counselor at every school or an on-staff nurse?
Thank you.
Or who? And do students generally know that? Do they have day one? Are they told if this should happen to you? You want to report it not to a teacher who that's a little.
So, okay, so.
Principal, but is there, who do you report it to?
Right. So what you're talking about kind of lends itself to the issue of mandatory reporting, right? Any teacher that looks at a student and sees a black eye, they should walk over to that student and find out how they got that black eye, right? Any kind of obvious physical, how did this happen? What happened? And, from there, the process kind of goes through. But here, again, we saw there's a statute that prohibits that. And in that case, that would be considered battery because, they, left a bruise. So that would be considered battery by Florida state statute. So depending, there could be legal consequences for that. But most of the schools here have a school resource officer in place. School resource officer. So when the teacher, says, hey, how'd you get that black eye? If they don't want to tell the teacher should be then going to the school resource officer to have the school resource officer follow that up. That's part of the reason that they're there.
And if you have in your neighborhood, on your street, in the public world, if you have a grievance, bullying is related, and you consider calling 911. Can you call anonymously? You tell them the problem, but I've had to do it in the past. Who are you? What's your name? Where do you live? And I'm like, does that mean I'm going to be visited at midnight and greatly inconvenient because of this? But it is a real problem. It needs to be addressed. Or is a resource officer, police person going to contact me or an actual policeman with a gun?
Well, all of our policemen actually have guns. If they don't, they're not sworn. So so that should just be an expectation anytime you meet with a police officer. But in regard to your question, there's a couple of different things going on there. First of all, number one is if there is no victim, there is no crime. Okay, that's just universally true. No victim, no crime. Now, when it comes to things like, are your neighbors using loud music to bully you, right? And or something like that. Those are things, there are ordinances in place, there are violations in place, but you have to talk to the officer. You have to explain to them what is going on. And again, because no victim, no crime, right? And so, now we do have the 1PSL app. You can do things through the One PSL app where if there's a pervasive ongoing problem, you can send a tip in through One PSL and it'll get forwarded over to the appropriate city department and they can try to follow up on it. But again, same thing. They can't go out and say to someone, I need you to stop bullying my neighbor. And they'll say, well, what neighbor? And they're like, just one of them. You know, I mean, there has to be, you know, unfortunately, you have to be willing to stand up for yourself and say, you know what, I'm not putting up with this. And if you want to continue this behavior, then you can keep continuing meeting with the fine men and women of the Port St. Lucie Police Department, because I will be more than happy to send them over to see you every single day. And we, repeat calls for service is something that our administration takes very, very seriously. So it basically gets to the point where, look, if this doesn't stop, you know, there's going to be consequence. So, okay?
When I've had to make a call like that, it's always, well, are they gonna, if somebody comes, do they come immediately, do they come 5 hours later when there's no trace of the disturbance?
When they come is completely relative to how many calls for service they are working, how many are holding, and what the priority of those calls are. So, you know, if they've got an armed robbery in progress, you're gonna wait 5 hours. If, you know, if there is nothing going on, you might wait 5 minutes. So,
A comment, you know, the new frontier seems to be the internet.
yes, thank you so much. I hope you found this helpful. The new frontier is the metaverse.
Thank you, ladies.
Fine, but I can tell you, 2 days ago, I turned on the local news, it was West Palm, and a senior man was annoyed with his next door neighbor who was, not leaf blowing, using the leaf blower after mowing the lawn at 7 o'clock in the morning, and they're extremely loud, and he was annoyed. You know, probably felt he couldn't negotiate with the person, and this has happened repeatedly. His response was, he got his gun, he went over and he shot the guy dead.
Mm-hmm.
And you know,
We have no way of predicting that. We have no way of predicting that. We have no way of predicting the triple homicide we had here. We had no way of predicting that.
but more than
So,
the internet, which at least if you're victimized on the internet, you're not probably battered or hit. You know, there's no, the person is a digital, you know, don't share your picture and where you live, etc. But it's online. You're not, the result of your bullying probably isn't your loss of life or being beaten up or.
no, that's not even close to true.
But they can find, yeah,
No,
I understand
that's not even close to true.
initial, but in this case, you know, someone's life was taken.
Yeah. And again, we have no way of predicting that. We don't know, you know, what was going on for those neighbors all of that time before that happened, right? What, so, you know, we could sit here and we can go through a gabillion scenarios and have none of them ever occur. We have to deal with things as they happen in the situation that's happening. So that's why it's important that you contact us and tell us exactly what's happening, okay?
Yeah, more worrying to me about the lack of civility in society.
Right.
For all kinds of reasons right now.
Right.
It's not the internet that I worry about, the bullying and what can happen with that. It's the weaponization of people everywhere.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
you have 10 neighbors, 9 of them have guns, 5 of them have AK-47s in their garage. You just don't know. They can go to a gun show at the city center, of Port St. Lucie. You know,
We still have a
institution,
constitutional right to bear arms.
It's like promoting the weaponization of adults.
Well, I mean, we still have a constitutional right to bear arms, and that whether your neighbor has 1 gun or 15 guns is not a predictor of whether or not they're going to shoot you, unfortunately. It's, you know, and see, this is why these things become so important and why we have to deal with things like mental health crisis, because we want to get to the people and in touch with them before they feel like their resort, their answer to the solution to the problem is to go shoot somebody. That, I mean, that should never be the answer to the problem. And so that's why we hold these series of events, because we want to try to help get resources to people long before they ever get to that. But if you're having a significant concern that you've got a neighbor who is escalating to the point that you're in fear that they're going to come out and shoot you, then by all means, contact the police department. We can talk with you about that, and we can try to see what we can do to engage resources to help you. Okay? All right. Well, thank you all
Thank you
so
all.
much.
Thank you so much. And when you said